Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Author Talks, Sūtra House's new weekly live series where we sit down with our authors to explore the stories behind their books, their creative process, and the ideas that inspire their writing. I'm Aleksandra Papadopoulou, marketing and communications consultant for Sūtra House, and I'm delighted to be your host today. I'm especially pleased to welcome Stephen Hayes, author of The Return of the Mary Celeste, one of Sutra House's debut novels. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. Many people
Hello, Alex.
recognize hello, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Many people recognize the name Mary Celeste, but not everybody remembers the extraordinary story behind it. Could you take us back to November 1872 and set the scene? What actually happened aboard the ship, and why has the mystery endured for more than 150 years?
Hello, Alexandra. I'm honored to be here for the launch of the Author Talks, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you my debut novel, Return of the Mary Celeste. Many people have heard of the Mary Celeste, but I think not a whole lot of people realize that it's a real, true story. There were a lot of things in the media about it, a lot of fanciful interpretations, but the Mary Celeste was a real ship and it had real people on board. And one of the things that appealed about it to me was that it it's never been solved. And that's one of the things that really appealed to me. The Mary Celeste left New York Harbor in 1872 with 1,700 barrels of alcohol bound for Genoa. It was an expensive cargo, was worth about $20,000 at the time, which is a lot of money when you consider you could buy a whole house back then for just a couple of thousand. The ship never made it to Genoa. It was found drifting in the middle of the Atlantic. It had drifted 500 miles with nobody on board, and the mystery of what has happened to the crew has never been solved. The ship remained in perfect condition, wasn't taking on water. There was no damage to it at all, and to this date, nobody has ever been able to figure out what happened.
Sounds quite spooky, doesn't it? And a true mystery for all mystery lovers.
Yeah.
So, the novel itself starts from one real detail. Captain Briggs had his wife and 2-year-old daughter aboard. Why was Sophia the door into this story?
Well, I was attracted to the idea of Sophia because there was a crew of seven, the captain, his wife. They all knew what they were getting into. Back then, 1872, you take a voyage across the Atlantic in December, wintertime, and you could expect that there's going to be some hardships. A 2-year-old child had really nothing to say about the matter. And for her to have disappeared, it just made my brain start to run and think, gee, what happened to these people, particularly what happened to her? This was a child who evidently never really had a chance to grow up. And I just found her story to be very appealing.
Yes, exactly. So we just gave our listeners a little glimpse of what happens in the novel, but let's just take a short step back again to the actual history. And I want you to tell me, when did this stop being a story you'd read about and become a story you had to write?
Uh, my mother's family came from the Azores, and the last sighting of the ship, it was the log that was left in the first mate's cabin had an entry that they had just passed the Azores at 8 o'clock a.m. By 9 o'clock, there was nobody left on board. Since my mother's family came from that area, this was a big thing to talk about. Also, my mother relocated to Boston, and there's a large Portuguese population there, and so this story continued to build and carry way. And uh, I lost my mother a few years ago. She managed to make it to 90, and I started thinking about these stories that she started telling my brother and I when we were kids, and it just seemed like an important thing to finally put it down on paper.
Of course, I agree. These stories that follow us from our childhood days are something that fascinate us, even when we are adults and fascinate our adult minds.
Right.
So staying on the tone of this being a true mystery and the actual story that happened. Conan Doyle got to the ship first, and a century and a half of theorists have piled on since. What made you think there was still something left to say?
Well, what I enjoyed about this story, and the reason that I thought it would make a good hook for a novel, was that I really celebrate it as a mystery. I didn't really intend to. There's a lot of books out there where people try and solve the mystery of what happened to the Mary Celeste. Uh, I don't really want to live in a world where every mystery has been resolved. I really don't want them to find Amelia Earhart. I wish they hadn't found the Titanic. So I celebrate the mystery of the Mary Celeste. Um, and, that's kind of why I thought it would make an excellent hook to fold a novel around.
Yes, and this is definitely a very interesting perspective that you have because people, as we know, usually when it comes to mysteries, conspiracy theories, anything falls under the term mystery, people become so overpowered by it, wanting to solve it. Whereas
Right.
you have a completely different perspective, wanting to keep it a mystery. So this is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And I also want to mention that you thank Paul Begg and Captain Dave Williams, I apologize, in the acknowledgments, the earthquake at sea theory, among others. How much
Mhm.
research did you do before you let yourself start inventing?
I did quite a bit of research. I read just about everything that there was out there. Of course, the Paul Begg book is kind of the definitive one. And I didn't want to fabricate anything about the Mary Celeste. It seemed kind of like a dishonest thing to do. And I did read that article about the possibility of there being sea quakes in the area as a possible explanation for what happened. But one of the little tidbits that I found that was very interesting was that in the captain's quarters, after the ship was found empty of crew, that there was a small vial of oil, sewing machine oil, that was on the captain wife's sewing machine, and it was vertical. And if there'd been sea quakes, it's hard to believe that after sailing 500 miles in earthquakes and storms that thing wouldn't have knocked over. So a lot of research went into trying to put little pieces of that into the story to give it a real authentic flavor.
Of course, I can imagine how much research went into it, especially when it comes to mystery that has been around for so many years. And
Right.
you just mentioned this fact that you didn't want to dishonor the passengers and the crew and the victims for the sake of fiction. So,
Mhm.
could you explain to us where did you draw that line? I imagine that this was a big challenge for you. How and where did you draw that line?
Where I drew it was that I didn't want to presume that I could resolve this mystery. I mean, after all, this ship was brought into a big hearing in Gibraltar when it was found, and there was I think it was an 18-month investigation into figuring out what happened back in 1872, and they couldn't figure out what happened. And like I said, I really celebrate mysteries, and I didn't want to put anything that was fake that would be attributed to the people that were on that ship. And I don't believe I did.
Yes, it's very. I can imagine how difficult that was and what a challenge that was. And I believe, yes, I believe that you succeeded in your goal, that you drew that line perfectly. And now we're going to turn history into fiction. So let's move on to the actual story that you have written, the fictional part. And let's talk about Anderson Owens. He is a late night radio host who makes his
Right.
living picking at mysteries and doesn't believe in much. So, where did he come from, and how much of him is you?
I would imagine quite a bit of him is me. I was raised by the youngest child in an immigrant family, and my mother was orphaned. Well, she wasn't orphaned, but her father died when she was 9, and she didn't get a whole lot of attention in her life. And one of the things that she did was she started reading everything that she could, and she also started questioning everything. She wasn't a person who really accepted things. She's not around now to hear all this concept about the fake news. But I think I did get from her the fact that I generally don't believe most of the things that I hear, certainly not on the first blush.
Okay, yes, and this desire to keep a mystery, as you say, is something maybe that comes from your mother because you said that she was the one who told you these stories. Is it maybe how she represented these stories, the stories that made you want to keep them a mystery?
Well, back in the day when she was talking about this, again, the media was flooded with a lot of wild speculation. You talked about how Arthur Conan Doyle, he was one of the first people to write a story about this ship. As a matter of fact, he got the name wrong. He called it Marie Celeste, which actually is how an awful lot of people know the name of this ship. But back then, there were all kinds of fanciful stories. A giant octopus pulled the crew out of the ship, that pirates took over, that the captain was a religious fanatic and killed everybody and jumped overboard. One of the things that I wanted to do was to separate fact from fiction and still come up with a really fast moving story that would hold the reader's attention.
I understand. And because you mentioned these, to say the least, interesting stories that people came up with of what might have actually happened, like the octopus, or could you maybe compare? This is what came to mind when you were just saying that. Could you compare maybe some stories that you know were made up back then and stories that are maybe made up to this day? Like, is there a difference in the type of stories that is being made up as a potential reality of what happened?
Well, one of the stories that comes to mind is, oh, I guess it was a few decades back, and Clive Cussler wrote a book called Raise the Titanic. And I thought that was kind of a very interesting idea. I mean, the Titanic, like the Mary Celeste, was a real ship. I don't believe in that book that he actually fictionalized people that were on the Titanic itself, but he kind of used it as a framework, as a hook to wrap his novel around, kind of like a mannequin, and you put kind of like a clothing over it. And that was what I was attempting to do using the Mary Celeste. Uh, I didn't really want to change anything to fictionalize anything about the ship, but I did want to create an interesting story that brought that into play.
Yes, and you definitely did. So you combined history and fiction, and you created a thrilling story. So it's 1872 for about 3 pages, and then it's a full throttle conspiracy thriller. So, how would you describe the book to someone browsing a table at a bookstore?
Well, I did just recently do an author greet and sign, and I had was at a table where there were hundreds of people walking by me, and a lot of people would say, "Well, what's your book about?" And they would see the picture of the ship on the cover, and they would say, "Gee, we really like books about shipwrecks." And I like to say to them, "Well, there's a lot of stories out there about shipwrecks, but there's not a lot of stories out there where the ship is not wrecked, remains perfectly intact, but it's the crew that disappears." And, that's what this book is really all about. I mean, the Mary Celeste was actually an absolutely perfect ship, even when it was discovered with the crew completely gone. So I like to pull that forward for people who like shipwreck stories, adventure stories, mystery stories. I was really trying to come up with an idea and a story that would appeal to an awful lot of people.
Right, and it's a very unique concept in that way. Maybe you can share with us, because you mentioned your readers and what you tell people. Maybe you can share some of their reactions or words when they first get to see the cover and when they first get a glimpse of your book. Do they expect this to be a completely fictional story, or do they expect it to be some sort of a historical thriller or something? What, like, based on reality? What do they expect, your readers, when they first come into contact with your story?
Well, I do get a lot of people that compliment the cover, and I can't take any credit for that. Sūtra House came up with the cover, and I couldn't actually be happier with it. I think it really reflects a mystery. It's not really overblown. There's not a tempest going on or anything like that. It's really a contemplative type of a thing. I haven't gotten anybody who thought it was nonfiction. So I think people expect that it is a novel, and of course, Suture House did a wonderful job of promoting it on the back flap and on the inside. So I haven't noticed anything in that direction that people were mistaken about, thinking that it was nonfiction.
Okay, so the cover gives away exactly what it's supposed to, right? The mood,
Right.
and it tells readers what to expect. And thank you for your kind words. So, if we were to talk a little bit about the craft of your writing, what does a writing day actually look like for you?
Well, maybe it's because of my Portuguese fisherman ancestors, but I tend to get up very early in the morning. Of course, I do have a little Cavalier Spaniel who likes to wake me up at about 5:30 every morning. I'm definitely a morning person, and my ideas come to me clearest early in the morning. So I usually write from, oh, say 5:30 to 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And then throughout the day, when I get an idea that of something that I can put down and make what I'm writing better, then I go to my computer and I put it down. I don't have a regular time schedule. Uh, I kind of write as the mood hits me.
Exactly. As most of us know, the creative process is unexpected, right? And
Right.
unpredictable. We never know when creativity might hit us. So, this book went through more than one full revision. And what changed most between the first version and the one readers are holding today?
That's a good question. I think that as I got into it more and more, and as I was talking with the folks at Sutra House, it seemed like I could embellish a little bit more the transformation from my protagonist, Anderson Owens, into a doubting Thomas skeptic, in becoming a person who could accept the possibility that there were things in the world that just couldn't be understood, that perhaps humans aren't even capable of understanding. I have his mother say in the book several times, miracles are only for those that are smart enough to understand them. And I think that the revisions worked very well to help me move that forward. We know that when we write, um, oh, heroic types of adventures, there's a thing called the heroic arc, where the hero has to go through a lot of difficulties to get that ring to Mordor. Uh, and for Anderson Owens, it was really about how do I make it convincing that this person who spent his life doubting everything, that all of a sudden he's encountered with something that he can't explain. And what happens when a skeptic encounters a verifiable miracle? And I think that that came into being quite a bit stronger through the revisions.
Yes, that indeed is a challenge, to have a character like that accept a miracle. What about you personally? What is your take on miracles, and do you believe in miracles? Are you more like Anderson Owens, or are you more of a miracle believer yourself?
Probably somewhere in between. Uh, I like to read a lot of scientific types of things, and particularly things that have to do with the universe and existence and that type of thing. And yet, the more that you read about it, the more that science brings us farther and farther out into the cosmos, the more I realize that existence and the universe and the cosmos is a very mystical, magical place that we shouldn't take for granted. Uh, I can't say whether or not I believe in miracles or not, but there has to be room left for them to exist.
Yes, I can say that. I definitely agree with that. And on the note of challenges like this and challenges in understanding something, was there a scene that fought you? One you rewrote more times than you'd like to admit?
Ah, the scenes that are in Portuguese were probably the greatest challenge for me. I could easily remember as a kid, back before cell phones, when the telephone was bolted to the wall, and my mother would sit there and she would talk to my grandparents, and the language would go back and forth from English to Portuguese, often in the same sentence. And unfortunately, I never picked up any of that Portuguese. But when I had scenes that took place in the book in the Azores and on the Portuguese mainland, it seemed important to carry through that flavor. And of course, Google helped me with a lot of the dialogue, but I wasn't really sure about a lot of it. And one day I was swimming at our local pool and I struck up a conversation with the fellow in the lane next to me. And he's mentioned in my acknowledgement page. His name was Jose Reese. And it turned out that he was born in Lisbon. And I said, hey, would you mind reading my manuscript and be sure that the Portuguese language is all that it should be? And he was able to do that for me, and I'm very grateful.
Right. So, on the note of miracles that we had just mentioned, sometimes the universe just sends us the people we need at that
It
moment,
gives
right?
you what you need.
Like exactly, like this gentleman.
Yeah.
So, on the note of people like this who are there to help us with our endeavors, who reads you first, and what do you do when they tell you something isn't working?
Ah. Um, the person that I first give my manuscripts to read is my wife of 53 years. Uh, she was an English major and she's an avid reader and she's got a very, very good eye. She's also what I like to think of as the golden mean. She's the perfect audience. If you give her something to read, if she likes it, most people are going to like it. And if she has a problem with it, then that's something that I should consider. And there have been times where she's read something and thought, she said to me, well, that doesn't really work. And usually I take her advice and it usually becomes a stronger product because of it.
Okay, and is there such a thing as too much advice when it comes to the writing process? Have you experienced a situation like this where you've gotten too much advice and you feel like it was maybe the opposite of helpful?
Hmm. Um, I don't think so. I know that every time I go to a writing convention or something like that, we're often told that in order to be a good writer, you have to do a lot of reading, that you should do a lot of reading. And I find that I tend to be a very good mimic. And I spent a career as an artist, and I would mimic a lot of other artists to the point where I kind of lost my own identity of who I was. So I guess there's a lot of advice and things that you can get from reading other fiction, but I tend to stick with nonfiction so that I can kind of remain true and kind of dig into myself to come up with my own identity.
Exactly, I understand. And you mentioned that in order to be a good writer, you need to read a lot of books. And the dedication in the book is to your mother, Alice, who first taught you to love books. What were you
Right.
reading as a kid that made you want to do this?
Well, it's kind of cheating a little bit, but a lot of the books that I read when I was a kid, I glommed onto them because of the wonderful illustrations. The uh, great illustrators like Howard Pyle, N.C. Wyeth. Uh, they illustrated a lot of books like Treasure Island, Robinson Crusoe, Robin Hood, things like that. And that combination of incredibly fun and interesting adventures coupled with wonderful illustrations, I would say that those were probably the first types of books that I got into.
Robinson Crusoe. So also adventure, maybe a little bit of mystery, right? So something that gave you your first inspiration maybe from an early
Sure.
age. And as a writer, what's the best piece of writing advice you've ever gotten and the worst?
The best that I ever got was a few years back. I went to a seminar that was hosted by David Morrell. David Morrell was or is widely credited with inventing the action adventure novel. He is the one who wrote Rambo, among a lot of other books. And we were invited to read the first page of our book or whatever we were working on at this seminar, and I read the prologue to Return of the Mary Celeste, and I remember him scratching his chin and then just saying, "Well, some things just can't be improved." And I thought that was probably going to be the best compliment I ever got. So that was the best thing, advice I ever got. He told me to keep it up. The worst was quite a few years back. I decided that it would be really easy to write a children's book, and so I wrote a children's book and I mailed it off to a New York children's book publisher. And I got a letter back from this gentleman saying that in the 47 years that he had been receiving manuscripts for children's books, mine was by far and away the worst he had ever gotten. So that was probably the worst advice I ever got when he told me to give it up.
Okay, yes, I can imagine. So you were definitely meant for uh, an adult group of readers, right?
No, I
More
still think
mature
that was a
stories,
pretty good I
right?
still think that was a pretty good children's book.
Well, maybe it was. One person's opinion doesn't always have to mean something,
So
right?
true.
Yes. So, what do you hope stays with the reader after the last page of your book?
I hope a lot of people who are where I started off at the beginning of this book, thinking that the world is a very explainable place, that everything is capable of being understood, that they can come away from this book thinking, well, gee, the world is a lot richer and deeper and more complicated than a lot of people imagine. There's a great movie, a great old movie with Rosalind Russell called Auntie Mame, where she says throughout the book, the movie rather, that the life is a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death. And I hope that my book gives people something to feed on, something to nurture them, something to make them realize that there's far more possibilities out there than people imagine.
Mhm. So you hope that it gives them a better banquet, right?
A better banquet, yeah.
A much better banquet. Okay. And would you maybe like to share with us what you're working on now?
I just finished my second novel. It's called The Lottery Pirate, and it's about a young man who has survived a tragic childhood, um, with his integrity intact. But when he learns a terrible secret about his past, he has to make some complicated choices and decide between his integrity, the woman he loves, and his very freedom. And without giving away a whole lot of the plot, it has to do with a stolen lottery ticket.
Oh, okay. So again, a little bit of mystery, some
I I like mysteries.
challenges.
Yeah,
Yes, questioning yourself. Okay, it
right.
sounds very intriguing. I bet that our readers are looking forward to that story as well. Thank you so much, Stephen, for
It's
our
been a pleasure.
conversation today. For me as well. I enjoyed talking about your book, your writing process, hearing about your inspiration. And I am sure that our readers and our listeners have enjoyed your stories as well. And I would like to thank everybody for listening today, for tuning in. And I would like to invite you to follow our weekly author talks every Friday at 1 p.m. New York time, and listen to the stories behind the stories and listen to conversations that matter with our respected authors. Thank you very much. Stephen, once again, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Goodbye. Goodbye.